Forget your gods, forget your emperors. Forget the white marble of the Senate and the whispered philosophies of the Forum. They are shadows. They are ideas, here in the heart of the sun-scorched circle. There is only the real dot, the smell of hot dust, stale wine, sweat, and slaughter. The sound of a heavy metal gate grinding open. The sudden, blinding light that assaults your eyes. And the weight of the helmet on your shoulders. And the weight of 80,000 pairs of eyes pressing down on your soul. This is the Colosseum, but it is not the Rome of statues and history books. This is the other Rome, a republic of blood, a senate of sand. For the men who ruled this city, the Caesars and the senators, this was spectacle. This was population control. This was a brutal, bloody display of power, a way to remind the masses, we are Rome, we own the world, and we own you. But for the men in the circle, the men whose boots are caked in that bloody sand, this was not a metaphor. This was a world beneath the feet of the mob. Yet somehow, above the gods of the underworld, this was the arena. And in this world, the gods did not have names like Jupiter, Mars, or Apollo Dot. They had names like Spartacus, Crixus, Flummer. They had names whispered by slaves and screamed by senators. They were the damnati, the damned. And they were the divine, the divine. They were property, bought and sold like cattle. And they were superstars, their portraits scratched into the walls of every tavern, their sweat bottled and sold as an aphrodisiac. They were the men, and sometimes the women who were forced to live by the sword, and celebrated for dying by it. This is not the story of the myth. This is the story of the man. The man who was dragged in chains from a distant forest, or who walked in willingly, broken by debt. The man who descended into the Ludus. The school of Paynan was forged into something more than human, unless something built for the savage ecstasy of the Roman crowd. This is the tale of the life, the training, and the brutal, forgotten art of the gods of the sand. Asterisk, the descent who becomes a gladiator. No one in the sunlit days of their youth dreams of this. It is not a choice. It is a fate one falls into. It is a sentence handed down not by a judge, but by fortune, by war, or by desperation. The glistening bodies on the arena floor were the ghosts of the Roman world, the refuse of empire. They came from 4 dark rivers, all flowing into one sea of blood. The first and most numerous were the prisoners of war. Imagine you are a chieftain of the Dacians. You fought to defend your home, your forests, your gods. You saw the legions, eagles rise over your burning village. You were captured, chained neck to neck with your brothers, and marched 1,000 miles. Your gods are silent. Your tribe is scattered. You are brought to Rome, a city of stone and noise that suffocates you. You are paraded in a triumph, a living trophy for a general you will never meet. Then you are sold, not to a quiet farm, not to a dimly lit mine. Your strength, your rage, the very defiance that burns in your eyes has marked you. You are too strong to be a quarry slave, too proud to be a house servant. You are sold to a Lanista, a merchant of death. And your war is not over. It has only just begun. But this time, you will fight for the entertainment of the very people who destroyed your world. The second source was the condemned, the damnati ad ludum. These were the bottom of society. The murderers, the arsonists, the traitors, the followers of forbidden cults. Their sentence was not a clean, quick death by the sword. That was a privilege reserved for citizens. Their sentence was to die for the crowd. It was execution as performance art. They were given a wooden sword and a shield and shoved into the arena at midday. During the lunch break, as a grim prelude to the main event, they were the Meridiani, the midday men. They were told to fight each other. The last one standing would have his throat cut by a professional. Most would not last a day, but a few, a very, very few, who showed a spark, a surprising instinct for survival, a flash of brutal talent that made the crowd murmur. They might be pulled from the execution block. They were not saved. Their sentence was merely commuted from a quick, clumsy death to a slow, professional one. They were thrown into the Ludus to learn how to die properly. The third source was the most desperate, the most shocking, the Octorati. These were free men, Roman citizens, men who had everything: freedom, a vote, and man lost it. They were men ruined by gambling debts, their family estates auctioned off. They were ex-soldiers who knew no other life but violence, bored in the stifling peace of the city. They were adventurers, thrill-seekers, or simply men who craved the roar of the crowd, the dark fame that came with the blood. They walked into the Ludus of their own free will, and they signed a contract. They sacrificed their legal status, their freedom, their very humanity. For a signing bonus and the chance of glory, they swore the terrible oath, the Sacramentum Gladiatorium. We hear it echoed in the words of Petronius. They stood before the Lanista and pledged to be burned, to be bound, to be beaten, and to be killed by the sword. Asterisk, Uri, Vinciri, Vibura, Varrock, Nicari, asterisk. They were agreeing to become, in the eyes of Roman law, no longer human. They were agreeing to become infamous outcasts, lower than a slave, on par with a prostitute or an actor. They had willingly traded their soul for a handful of silver and a wooden sword. And finally, the fourth river, those born into it, the Verni, the children of the Ludus, born to female slaves in the barracks or to gladiators who allowed brief comforts. They knew no other world. Their entire life was the smell of the training yard, the sound of steel on wood, and the shadow of the arena wall. They were the truest products of the system, forged from birth for one single, brutal purpose, whatever the path the captured warrior, the condemned criminal, the desperate citizen, the born slave. The destination was the same. The heavy, iron-studded gates of the Ludus would open, and they would close behind you, your old life, your name, your family, your gods. They were gone. They were smoke. A new life, a life of absolute obedience and spectacular violence, was about to begin. The Ludus, the school of Pieon, this prison, this forge, this dark university of violence, was called the Ludus. The school, the great schools, like the Ludus Magnus in Rome, were masterpieces of grim efficiency. It was built right next to the Colosseum, connected by a subterranean tunnel, a dark umbilical cord leading from the womb of training to the theater of death. At its center was not a classroom, but an arena, a miniature Colosseum, its sand floor packed hard by the feet of generations of trainees. This was the practice yard. Around it, the cells. Do not imagine rooms. These were tiny, dark, damp, and often windowless. 2 men, sometimes 3, to a space barely large enough for one. This was where they slept, often in chains, to prevent escape or murder. This was their only privacy, a shared coffin of stone. The Ludus was a self-contained world. It had its own forges to repair armor, its own kitchens, its own infirmary. It was owned and operated by a man known as the Lanista. The Lanista was a figure of profound contradiction. He was, in the eyes of the Roman elite, the lowest of the low, a pimp of violence, a merchant of death, a creature of the gutter who profited from the suffering of others. He was socially despised, and yet he was often a businessman of immense wealth and influence. His familia Gladiatoria, his gladiator family, was his dragon's hoard. He was an investor, a speculator in human flesh. He would feed his men, house them, train them, and, most importantly, heal them. Not from kindness, but as a master craftsman sharpens his most expensive tools. A top-tier gladiator, a primus palis, was a massive investment, worth more than a senator's countryside villa. The Lanista would not see that investment wasted. He was a monster, but he was a rational monster. Life in the Ludus was a brutal, monotonous rhythm, broken only by terror and pain. It was ruled by the doctors. The trainers, these were the true masters of the craft. They were almost always ex-gladiators themselves, men who had survived, men who had won their freedom with the Rudis, the wooden sword of discharge. They were the hardened survivors, the graduates. They were harsh, exacting, and knew every trick, every dirty move, every weakness of the human body. There was a doctor for the Thraeces, Thracians, a doctor for the Murmillones, a specialist for every type. They carried a long rod, a virga, and they did not hesitate to use it. Their voices were a constant bark in the training yard, drilling, correcting, punishing. They were breaking the man to build the killer. The Ludus also had its own medicus. A surgeon. These were not quacks. They were often the most skilled surgeons in the entire Roman world. They had to be. They dealt with wounds no other doctor ever saw. Trident punctures, deep net cuts, shattered bones from a wall. Swords slipped between ribs. They became masters of anatomy, of diet, of rehabilitation, the most famous physician in Roman history. Galen, one of the fathers of modern medicine, began his career as a doctor in a ludus at Pergamum. He learned the human body from the inside out by studying the broken, open bodies of these warriors. He perfected his craft by patching up the Lanista's property, keeping the show on the road. And then there was the familia itself. The other gladiators, this was the dark, central paradox of the gladiator's life. The man you ate with, the man you shared a cell with, the man who taught you how to bandage your shins, the man who held you down as the medicus stitched a wound without anesthetic, the man who became your closest, perhaps only friend in this living hell, might be the man you were ordered to kill next month. A strange, intense, and deeply tragic bond was formed. A brotherhood of the condemned. They called each other Sardalis-comrade. We see their desperation for meaning, for existence in the graffiti they left behind. Crescent. The Retiarius holds the hearts of the girls. 34 fights, 21 victories. They had their own unions, their collegia, which were, in effect, burial societies. They would pool their meager prize money to ensure that if a man died, he would be given a proper burial, that his name would be carved on a tombstone. The tombstones are heartbreaking. They list the man's name, his type, his ludus, and the number of his victories. It was a desperate, final cry into the void, a scream to prove to the gods and to history that they had, in fact, existed. The social structure of the Ludus was as rigid as any legion. At the very bottom was the novice, the terrified new arrival, the rookie. He was abused by all, his life a misery of fear and endless agonizing drills. Above him were the trained fighters, the veterans, men who had seen the arena and returned. They were cynical, scarred, and dangerous. And at the very top, the pollice, the first poles, the champions. These men were the gods of the Ludus. They were the living proof that survival and even a twisted kind of glory was possible. They had better food. They had better, cleaner cells, sometimes private ones. They were sometimes allowed to receive female admirers, Roman ladies of status who, overcome by a morbid fascination, would pay the Lanista for a night with a champion. They were the heroes, and they were the most tragic figures of all, because they were the ones who had to kill their friends. The forging, the daily arroity, and the sun has not yet risen. A cold mist hangs over the yard, but the Ludus is awake. The sound of shouting, of wood striking wood, of men gasping for air, echoes off the cold stone walls. The training has begun. The gladiator's life was one of relentless, mind-numbing, agonizing training. The day began with the novice learning the absolute basics. He would be handed a Rudis, a heavy wooden sword, and a Secutor, a heavy wicker shield. His first opponent was not a man, it was the pollice. The pollice was a wooden stake, 6 feet high, driven deep into the hard-packed earth of the yard. This was his first teacher. His only teacher. The doctor would stand behind him, rod in hand, and the novice would attack the pollice. For hours and hours and hours and hours, he learned footwork. Advance, retreat, side dash, step. He learned the numeri, the numbers, the series of blows, a strike to the head, a thrust to the chest, a cut to the legs. The Romans were not interested in the wild, slashing, barbarian attacks. That was for the movies. They taught a grim, efficient, lethal science. Thrust, don't slash. A deep, penetrating wound is what kills. A slash just looks good. He was taught to watch his enemy's eyes, not his weapon. He was taught to never, ever expose his back. He was taught how to take a blow on the shield, how to absorb the shock in his knees, not his arm, how to conserve his energy, how to breathe. This was the first lesson. Conditioning. The pollice never tired. It never felt fear. It never made a mistake. It never backed down. The novice had to become better than the pollice. He had to become a machine. His hands would bleed, the blisters would burst, the splinters would bury themselves in his arms. The doctor did not care. Again, as he advanced, the training became more specialized. This was a crucial moment. The Lanista and the doctors would study his body, his temperament, his natural instincts. Was he big, powerful, a wall of a man. He would become a Murmillo or a Secutor. Was he fast, agile, cunning, a bit of a trickster? He would become a Retiarius. Was he stocky, aggressive, a natural brawler? A Thraex. Once his type was chosen, his life changed. He was no longer just an evict. He was a tyro, an apprentice. He would train only with a doctor of his specialization. He would learn to use the real weapons, but with their tips blunted or covered. He would fight mock duels, prelusions against other tyrones. These were still brutal. Bones were broken, teeth were lost, but they were not to the death. Not yet, and then there was the body. The gladiator's body was his only tool, his only weapon, his only armor. Their diet was a specific, engineered thing. It was not the lean, protein-rich, shredded diet of a modern athlete. It was the exact opposite. They were fed a high carbohydrate, high-fat mush. The gladiatorium saginum, or gladiator's mash. It was composed mainly of barley, beans, oats, and ash for the minerals. They were nicknamed Orderi Botniman. This diet was intentional. It was science. It did two things. First, it provided massive, slow-burning energy for the grueling, all-day training sessions. Second, and more importantly, it built a thick layer of subcutaneous fat over their muscles. This layer of fat was a form of armor. It protected them from the most common, superficial wounds. A slashing cut from an opponent's sword, which looked so dramatic to the crowd, might slice through the fat, creating a spectacular, bloody wound. The crowd would roar, but it would not sever a muscle. It would not puncture an organ. It kept the fighter in the match. It made the show last longer. It protected the Lanista's investment. A lean, muscular gladiator was a dead gladiator. A fat gladiator was a survivor. The training was endless. They would run. They would lift heavy stones. They would practice their weapon drills until their arms felt like lead. And at the end of the day, they would be fed their body, checked by the medicus, and chained back in their celle. And they would wait. They would listen for the doctor walking down the corridor. They would wait for the day their name was posted on the wall. The day they would leave the Ludus and walk down that dark, subterranean tunnel. That the day they would hear the roar of the crowd, a sound like the ocean, and fight not for practice, but for their life. The archetypes, the gods of the sand in the arena, the gladiator, was not just a man. He was an idea. He was an archetype, a character in a brutal, living play. Each type of gladiator was a masterpiece of military design, a perfect balance of offense and defense, created specifically to be a perfect counter to another. The pairings were not random. They were a science, a blood sport ballet. Let us meet the stars of this bloody drama. First, the Murmillo. The fishman. He was the classic, heavy He was the vision of the Roman Legionary. He carried the scutum, the large, curved, rectangular shield that had conquered the world. In his right hand, he held the gladius, the short, stabbing sword of the soldier. His head was protected by a large, heavy bronze helmet with a wide brim and a high, fin-like crest. Said to resemble a fish to murmur, he wore a manica or armored sleeve on his sword arm, and a heavy greave, a shinguard, on his left leg. He was power. He was the establishment. He was the image of Rome itself. He was slow, defensive, a walking fortress. His opponent was almost always the Thraex, the Thracian. If the Murmillo was the Roman soldier, the Thraex was the barbarian enemy. He was the echo of Spartacus, who was himself a Thracian. He was designed to be the opposite of the Murmillo. His shield was a parmula, a small, square, or round shield. It offered little protection. He was forced to be agile, to dodge, to move. And his weapon was the Secutor, a short, curved, terrifying sword, like a scimitar. It was designed to do one thing: hook around the Murmillo's heavy skin, to find the gaps in the armor, to slash at the neck and the unprotected back of the knees. His helmet was broad-brimmed, often topped with a griffin, the creature of his homeland. When a Murmillo fought a Thraex, the crowd wasn't just watching a duel. They were watching a story. The disciplined Roman legionary versus the fierce, wild, and cunning barbarian. Then there was the Hoplomachus, another heavy type, an echo of the Greek hoplite soldier. He carried a small, round, bronze shield, like a Spartan's, but his primary weapon was a spear, the husk. He would begin the fight at a distance, jabbing, trying to keep his opponent at bay. A master of ranged combat. When the spear was lost, or the fight closed in, he would draw his gladius, or a pugio dagger. He, too, was often pitted against the Murmillo. In another symbolic replay of Rome's conquest of Greece. And then there was the superstar, the villain, the artist, the Retiarius, the netman. This gladiator was a scandal. He broke every rule. He wore almost no armor, no helmet, no shield. His chest was bare. His face was visible to the crowd. This was key. They could see his fear, his rage, his desperation, his triumph. He was a person, not a machine. His only protection was a high, broad metal guard on his left shoulder, protecting his neck, and a manica arm guard on his left arm. He was a creature of speed and cunning. In his right hand, he held the fusina, the trident, the weapon of the sea god Neptune. In his left, he held his most terrible weapon, the reti, the net, a weighted circle of woven cord. His strategy was to run, to dance, to circle his opponent, to tire him out. He was looking for an opening, to cast the net, to ensnare his foe, to tangle him in its mesh. If the net landed, he would move in with the trident, a fisherman spearing his catch. If he missed, he was in terrible danger. He would have to drop the net and run, trying to reel it in for another cast, or draw his small pugio dagger as a last resort. He was despised by traditionalists as an effeminate fighter, a coward. But for the crowd, he was pure, unpredictable entertainment. His opponent was, by law, one man, the Secutor, the chaser. He was born for one purpose, to kill the Retiarius. The Secutor was a variation of the Murmillo. He had the same heavy scutum, the same gladius, but his helmet was a masterpiece of psychological terror and functional design. It was perfectly smooth, ovoid, like an egg. No crests, no brim. It was designed so the net of the Retiarius would slide right off, and it had only two tiny, pinprick eye holes. Inside that helmet, the Secutor was almost blind. He was almost deaf. He could hear nothing but the roar of the crowd as a distant muffled thunder and the sound of his own breath. Ragged and metallic. Sound deep, ragged. Amplified breathing inside a helmet. He was a dragon in a cave. He was relentless, walking death. He would simply advance. He was the chaser. This was the ultimate pairing. The Retiarius versus the Secutor. The fisherman versus the fish. The sea versus the land. Chaos versus order. The nimble, naked, visible trickster versus the blind. Inexorable, anonymous tank. It was the single most popular and most staged duel in Roman history. There were other, more exotic types, who began the fight on horseback. The Retiarius, who fought from a chariot. A nod to the Celts of Britain. The provocateur, the challenger. The only gladiator to wear a full breastplate, who always fought a mirror match of skill. The Debtors, a fighter of pure spectacle, who wielded 2 swords, one in each hand. The Scissor, terrifying sight, who had a gladius in one hand and a hollow-bladed tube covering his other arm, ending in a razor-sharp crescent-shaped blade, and, rarest of all, the gladiator. The female gladiator, we know they existed. They were rare, a novelty, often mentioned with scandalous disapproval by Roman writers. But the art, the inscriptions, they are clear. They fought and they died, the same as the men. This was the cast of the play. Each man, upon entering the Ludus, was stripped of his identity and given a new one. He was no longer a Dacian, a German, or a Roman. He was a Retiarius. His mask was his new face. His armor was his new skin. The arena anatomy of a PhD, the day of the Munus, the games, has come. The gladiator is woken before dawn. He is given a final, hearty meal. This is the Cena Libra, the free dinner. It is a feast, a banquet. He can eat and drink all he wants. Wine, roasted meat, bread. For many, it will be their last. It is a strange, quiet, terrifying affair. Some men gorge themselves. Some pray. Some sit in stony silence. Then, the procession. The great gates of the Colosseum swing open. The crowd, 80,000 strong, lets out a roar that shakes the very stones. The gladiators march in, not in their armor, but in splendid, embroidered robes of purple and gold. They are led by lictors, by musicians playing the hydraulis, the water organ and the tuba, a long bronze horn. They are beautiful. They are property. They are sacrifices. They parade around the arena, a wave of color and music. Soaking in the adoration and the hate, they circle the arena and they stop before the imperial box. They raise their right arms and they speak the famous, terrible words, asterisk, avenue, imperator. Morituri te salutant, asterisk, hail. Emperor, we who are about to die salute you. The spectacle begins. The morning is reserved for the beast hunts, but this is not a gladiator fight. This is a spectacle of slaughter, a demonstration of Rome's dominion over nature itself. From hidden elevators in the floor, the pegmata, the wonders and terrors of the empire, are raised into the arena. Wild boars, bears, lions from Africa, tigers from India, crocodiles, elephants, rhinos, creatures brought from the furthest corners of the world, disoriented, terrified, and enraged out They are hunted and killed by the beast hunters, specialized fighters who are not quite gladiators, but skilled professionals in their own right. The sand is soaked red before the main event has even begun. Then, the midday, the meridiani. This is the grim interlude. When many respectable citizens leave for lunch, this is the time for the damnati. The executions, the sand is soaked with the blood of the condemned. The damnat ad bestias are brought out, tied to stakes, and torn apart by lions. Worse, the fatal charades. Criminals are forced to reenact myths. A man dressed as Orpheus plays a lyre, and then bears are released to tear him apart. Another, as Icarus, is hoisted to the top of the arena and dropped, exploding on the sand. This is the entertainment for the lunchtime crowd. This is the dark, sadistic heart of Rome. And then, the afternoon, the air is hot, thick with the smell of blood, awful wine and perfumes sprinkled to mask the stench. The trumpets sound again. The main event has come. The gladiatorial contests sound a single trumpet blast. The crowd roars to life. Let us watch one. A Thraex versus the barbarian versus the Roman. The referee, the Summa Rudis, inspects their weapons. The crowd places their bets. The Murmillo, the heavy infantryman, forms his testudo, his shield wall. He advances slowly, his gladius held low, ready to thrust. The Thraex, the barbarian, is a whirlwind of motion. He circles, his small palmless shield moving constantly, his curved seeker flashing in the sun. The Murmillo thrusts. The Thraex dances away. The Thraex counters, his curved blade hooking over the top of the big shield, clanging off the Murmillo's helmet. The crowd is screaming. Habit. He has him. Asterisk. Hoc habit. He's hit. The Murmillo is patient. He is a tank. He is waiting. The Thraex is getting tired. His agility is his only defense. He lunges, a feint. The Murmillo doesn't fall for it. The Thraex lunges again, for real this time, trying to get inside. The Murmillo moves. Not a step, but a pivot. He traps the Thraex's blade with his shield. He shoves. The Thraex stumbles. And the Murmillo, with grim, legionary efficiency, thrusts his gladius. Once. Deep into the Thraex's side, under the arm. Into the gap in the armor, the Thraex falls to his knees. His helmet drops. He looks at his opponent. He is defeated. He raises one finger. The ad digitum. He is surrendering. He is appealing for his life. The Murmillo stops. He turns, not to the man he just defeated, but to the crowd. The referee, the Summa Rudis, steps forward, and now, the moment of truth. The Thraex is on his knees, his life hanging by a thread. The Lanista who owns him is in the stands, praying for him to be spared. He is a valuable property, but the decision does not belong to him. It belongs to the editor, the giver of the games in this case, the emperor himself. The emperor, however, is a politician. He looks to the crowd. The crowd is a single, monstrous, 80,000-headed beast. What do they want? Did the Thraex fight bravely? Did he show virtues? Did he entertain them in his death? Or was he a coward? Did he fall too quickly? Today, they are merciful. Or perhaps he was a crowd favorite. They wave their handkerchiefs. They shout asterisk release. Let him go. The emperor sees. He turns his thumb, the pollice, verso. We do not know for sure if up or down meant life or death. The gesture is debated, but the signal is given. Let us say it is thumbs up, life. The Thraex is misses. He is spared. He will be taken back to the Ludus, patched up by the medicus, and he will live to fight and bleed another day. But what if the crowd was cruel? What if the Thraex had been clumsy, or had slipped, or had tried to run? They would scream, a sound of pure bloodlust, asterisk, ugula. Slay him, cut his throat. They would turn their thumbs down. The emperor, bowing to their will, would give the signal. The Murmillo would then be required, by his oath, to kill the beaten man. He would force the Thraex to his knees. He would hold his head steady, and he would plunge his gladius deep into the man's neck or into his back, severing the spinal cord, a quick, professional, and brutal death. The body would be removed. Men dressed as Curran, the mythical ferryman of the underworld, would strike him on the head with a mallet. Another, dressed as Mercury, would prod him with a red-hot iron. To ensure he was truly dead, he would be dragged out of the arena through the gate of liberty. The goddess of death, his armor and weapons would be stripped in the spoliarium. The stripping room, the slaves would run out. They would rake the sand, covering the fresh, dark stain, and the trumpets would sound again. The next fight was ready. The redemption, the path to Fairred of the Gladiator, had only two ways out of the Ludus. The first, and by far the most common, was death. He would die in the arena, his blood raked into the sand, or he would die in the Ludus infirmary of infection, his wounds festering. His name would be carved on a tombstone by his soddles, his comrades, and he would be forgotten by all but them. But there was another path, a sliver of hope, a dream. If a gladiator fought, if he fought with spectacular bravery, with skill, with virtues, if he won and won and won again, if he survived 3, 4, 5 years of this brutal, relentless combat, if he became a primus palis, a hero of the crowd, a man whose name was scribbled on the walls of the city, a man the emperor himself knew by name, he might be granted his freedom. This was the ultimate prize. In a grand ceremony, perhaps in the arena itself after a magnificent victory, the editor or the emperor would summon him. The gladiator, scarred and battered, would kneel in the blood-soaked sand, and he would be presented with a Rudis. The Rudis, the same simple, wooden sword he had been given on his first day in the Ludus. The same sword he had used to strike the Palus 1,000 times. This wooden sword was now the symbol of his life. It meant his oath was fulfilled. It meant his contract was over. He was no longer a gladiator. He was no longer a slave. He was a free man. This was the dream. But what was the reality? What became of a man who won his freedom? He was a celebrity. He was a sex symbol. Roman ladies of high status would pay fortunes to spend a night with a famous, scarred champion. He was rich, having earned massive prize money from his victories, but he was also forever infamous. An outcast stained his legal status. Even as a free man, was lower than that of an ordinary citizen. He could not hold political office. He could not join the Senate. He could not make a will. He could not appear as a witness in court. He was marked forever by the sand. He was a hero and he was trash. Many could not leave the life. Where would they go? What would they do? The only skill they had was killing. The only world they knew was the Ludus. Many of them stayed. They became the doctors, the trainers, the new harsh masters with the long rods, teaching the next generation of terrified Navishi how to attack the Pollice. Others became bodyguards for wealthy senators or merchants. Their scarred, intimidating presence a walking warning, and some were so addicted to the roar, so lost to the life, that they could not leave. The records tell of the Gladiator, a Secutor from Syria. He was so famous, so beloved by the crowd, that he was offered the Rudis 4 separate times, and 4 times he refused it. He chose to remain a gladiator. He chose the chains. He chose the arena. It was the only world he knew, the only place he felt alive. He died in it at the age of 30, after 34 fights, 21 victories, 9 draws, and 4 defeats. He chose to die a god of the sand. This was the world of the Colosseum. It was not a world of emperors and generals. Though they watched from their high marble seats, it was a world of men brought from the depths of despair, captured, condemned, or broken. Men forged in a crucible of unbelievable pain, stripped of their names, their families, and their humanity, and then, for the brief, blinding, terrifying moments on the sand, they were turned into gods. They were slaves. But in the arena, in that moment of truth, they held more power than any senator. They held the breath of 80,000 people. They were the damned, but their names have outlived the names of the emperors who sent them to their deaths. We have forgotten the names of the men who sat in the stands. We remember Spartacus. We remember Flumma. They were the tragic, brutal, and immortal superstars of the other Rome. The Rome built not of marble, but of sweat and sand and blood.